Welcome to Mindfulness Manufacturing, the podcast for manufacturing leaders and professionals.
Designed for high impact on your way to work or unwind on your way home to gain clarity for tomorrow.
Step out of your comfort zone and discover new perspectives to add value, get results, and make a difference.
Yes, let's jump in.
Super excited to have our friend Nikki Langman on today. She's got a background in human resources, coaching, learning and development. She's an international speaker, consultant, facilitator. Dave and I met her through the GenOS community, and she just published her book, How to Be a Badass, Navigating Your Road to Self-Mastery. Well, Dave, we've talked a lot about different emotional intelligence topics, but have you heard this link with emotional intelligence and safety on the workplace shop floor?
Rarely, if ever, Trevor. What do you mean? Where are you going with this?
Well, we're going with Nikki here. And yeah, when she spoke on stage in Hawaii and broke that down, Nikki, tell us, how did this start?
Hey, Trevor. Hey, Dave. Thank you so much. Wow. Where did it start? That's a good question. And one I'm not even sure if I could answer myself, because when you look back over something that evolved over time and try to find a starting point, it's like, I'm not really sure if I can pinpoint that. But what this experience was, and what I talked about at the conference in Hawaii, was about my experience as an internal learning and development manager for a global organization, where I was given the project of conducting an emotional intelligence leadership development program. So taking all of the leaders across Australia and putting them through a rigorous 6-month emotional intelligence development program. I looked at that. I looked at the scope of that project, and before we were starting it, but when we were still just signing off on the dotted line and crossing the T's, I looked back and I thought, well, wait a minute. It's going to cost X amount to do a leadership program, but we can kind of morph this into, think of emotional intelligence skills as life skills, not exclusively leadership skills. So I took a step back and I rescoped the project and said, well, for this much, we can train all the leaders. For this much, we can train all the employees. And there really wasn't that much of a difference. So that's where, I think the larger lens came into place, was in how do you contextualize the same information for leaders in a boardroom as you do workers on the floor of a plant. And it was the same content, just framed very differently. And this is where I think the idea of safety started to take shape, was in what do we say? How do we make it appealing so that people come away going, wow, yeah, these are really some valuable life skills.
Well, that's great, because safety just cuts across the entire organizational model, right? It doesn't matter if you're an executive of the highest ranks or, hands on the handles on the floor on third shift. Everyone can relate to safety and the opportunity that some type of education, training, development can bring to the table. Safety is just that common denominator for all. That's awesome.
When you first set this up with everyone, that wasn't the conversation though, around safety in the beginning.
No,
tell me more about that.
Yeah. Safety is a safe word. And to Dave's point just a minute ago, it's something that everyone can absorb. You say, okay, we're going to do some safety training, and that looks okay. The budget says that's okay. Leadership says that's okay. And the people wearing the high vis on the floor say that's okay. We can do safety training. You talk about emotional intelligence training though, and whoa, all of a sudden you get closed doors and closed minds.
That's right.
Because it's not acceptable. And we like to say it's emerging in its acceptance, but in most of the world, and especially in industries that are more high risk, it's not acceptable yet to talk about feelings. It's not acceptable yet to talk about the influence that mental health has on our physical safety. So I think that was one of the big keys for me in the beginning, was that I had to take the word emotion out. and I had to reframe. So when I was looking at the scope and how to present this project across the broader organization, and Australia, man, there's some really, it's very masculine, and our workforce is here. So being an American woman working in an Australian plant in cargo handling, wow, that's a different podcast.
Yeah.
But it was, yeah, very, very careful in the approach of how you use emotion. So safety, being that safe word, was easy for us to come in and say, all right, well, we're going to do some safety training, and it has nothing to do with the tools, has nothing to do with the forklifts, has nothing to do with your cards. We're going to go into a room and we're going to talk about the impact that some things like trust and communication have on your ability to work effectively. And so kind of backpedaling it that way was really, really effective.
Interesting. So it did start with safety conversations right from the beginning. It just wasn't the essence. It was more in how that was framed. And then the connections started to grow as you started to develop the program.
Yeah, indeed. And I think it was, psychological safety was something that has grown in popularity in the last even just couple of years. We're seeing a lot now about psychological safety and the need for it. And the statistics are coming out. When I started this project back in, I think it was 2017 or 2018, psychological safety wasn't as much in the news as it is today. So yes, well, we were framing it as safety in the beginning. We weren't expecting the results were actually going to translate into physical safety. It was more about using that safety word as a safe word to get people into a room to even begin a discussion about communication and trust. Now, a few years later, we can go into a business and frame it up front as this is psychological safety training, whereas a few years ago that was still, evolving.
Oh, so it's not just a soft skill.
Not just a soft skill. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't need any more soft skills. There's no payback in that. And then we start to unpack it, and it's like, oh, hold on a minute. Maybe we're not connecting the dots.
Well, can I tell you what happened during this program? So, we've now talked about the beginning of the program and how we widened the scope and we got people into a room and we started doing the training. Over 12 months, we did a staggered release of the program. So across states, across departments, and I was going back and forth and ended up in the end training 128 employees. So that was 93 were employees and the rest were leadership. And this was end to end a 12-month program. And what was the single best result that came out of everything? We marked, we measured, we analyzed, we did all of it along the way. We did post-program feedback and follow-up and things, and we ticked all the right boxes. But the one thing that stood out more than anything else was that we took our lost time injuries down from 7 to 1. So we decreased our lost time injuries by 86% in 12 months. At the same time, we doubled our reported near misses. So we went from 18 to 36 reported near misses that same year. And that was shocking. It was shocking to me. It was shocking to the leaders. It was shocking to, to our corporate partners overseas when they saw, wow. So by talking about trust, by talking about communication, by talking about accountability, we are able to get people to start making better choices in the way that they work, in the way they communicate, and with each other. So, lost time injuries can be anything. They can range in severity of a broken limb to severe trauma and total and permanent disability. There's a very wide range of what a lost time injury can look like. So in Hawaii, that was the thing that I wanted to put forth to the Genos International community more than anything else, rather than the nuts and bolts of how the program was run and the logistics of it, was emotional intelligence training can save lives.
Wow, that's powerful. That's powerful.
It is. It,
So,
it
so
is.
in the GenOS emotional intelligence model, we've got self-awareness, awareness of others. You might can tell where I'm going with this in the context of safety, just by saying those two things, especially in a manufacturing environment. But, you know, when you add in things like emotional reasoning, you add in authenticity, being real, right? Saying it like it is, creating some vulnerability there. And then, you know, the ability for leaders to inspire others. And then I guess the last one, I believe in the GenOS model, is the self-management area.
Mm,
In these areas of emotional intelligence, we're talking about the GenOS model, but in these areas for emotional intelligence, Nikki, which of those do you think perhaps would have been the most impactful with either the workforce day to day, or maybe those that the leaders connected the safety concept to? Which of those do you think would have been most powerful?
it's a great question, Dave. Everything starts with self-awareness. Yes, without that, you certainly cannot use any of the other skills. And then I would say probably after that would be self-management. So those two, but starting with the awareness. How are you responding to things? How are you responding to the stress in your environment? How do you respond to the people around you? And especially when you get behind the wheel of a, Godzilla machine, how are you feeling? Are you in the right headspace, the right mind frame to be in that position, to be behind that wheel? Those are some very big questions. But when we turn the lens on ourselves first, when we go, if I am not aware of my actions, the way I'm being perceived, and acting from a reactive position, then it all kind of starts to tumble inside.
Yeah, and it's amazing how statistically, first thing on a Monday morning or last thing on a Friday afternoon, how a lot of organizations have documented how safety incidents are recorded during those times where perhaps someone's head's not in the game. When I'm coming into work and I've just had an episode with my child, or I just got a speeding ticket, or I'm thinking about what I did not get to do before I came into work, those things are all in my head spinning around. And if I am not aware in this self-awareness arena, if I'm not aware of how that is impacting what I do and how I do it as I operate this heavy equipment, that's when things can really go south.
Yeah. Even, the next peg of being able to call other people out if you see that their behavior is not where it should be. So what is your relationship like with the people that you are currently working with? And do you have the permission? Do you have their permission to pull them aside and go, hey, are you okay?
Yeah, another way I was thinking of it in a different way. John Vanderwest, a friend of mine, runs a safety consulting business in Ontario. And we had this conversation, and I kind of look at it as that, either you're jumping on a fork truck and you only need to drive 15 feet. Do you really need to do the pre-shift inspection? Or should I just jump on? It's pretty quick. My boss is watching. Or I got my safety glasses on and I'm going to grind something, and the grinder's about a 60-second walk away. It's a small burr. Let's just knock this off. But yeah, do you have that? And I don't know if it's self-awareness or if it's more back to your core values of saying, hey, it's the core values of the organization to, hey, bring up, hey, I'm going to go get my face shield, or I'm going to do this. Is that there? So how much, and that's just how I hear, and it's my perception of things, but how much of that affected the organization going through that? Like making it okay to say, hey, I don't think this is safe.
Well, and that's part of the self-management that Nikki referred to in addition to self-awareness. I mean, those are great examples for self-management as well.
That's where leadership has to be present, is in, when we think of leadership, we often think of the very top down. So, we look at executive leadership, we look at senior management, but let's just talk about the team leaders. Let's just talk about shift leaders. They need to be empowered. Those lower level leadership positions have to be empowered to enforce good behavior. So, exactly, Trevor, what you're talking about, it's just a small job. I got my glasses, my hat's, it's going to take me too long to go get my hat. Those are the stories we hear about after they've left the emergency room, about the shortcuts that were taken, about the time savers, it's only 15 feet. Yeah. And those are the, every workplace safety horror story has some element of that, has some element of a shortcut, and maybe even a fear of being reprimanded for taking too long. And that was something that, that's for a different discussion, but that was something that I unpacked a lot of with Cargotec during that EI training process, was that they were under tremendous pressure from their contractors to get things done in a certain amount of time. And so a lot of shortcuts were taken because they felt the pressure of time. And I think that's one of those elephants that needs to come out in the room. Absolutely. It's an elephant that people need to, be empowered with the ability to speak up and say, you know what, we can do it in this amount of time, but we'll take X, Y, and Z risks. Or we can do it in this amount of time and make sure that everyone's going to go home safe.
And I think it was so crucial that, you had everybody in the program. Like a lot of times, like, oh yeah, we'll just train the leadership. But how are we all on the same page, right? How are we all getting that same message, the same, we talked about the whole soft skills, but really it's that skill that helps you at home, at work, and just keeping safe in general, but just, how we perceive, understand, reason, and manage with our own and other emotions to get those productive outcomes. I mean, that's the essence of that whole emotional intelligence. And it's almost like it's, on one side, it's becoming a buzzword, which isn't good. And then on the other side, it's still like a word that's just doesn't want to be heard in manufacturing. So we're just trying to find, like, what's that sweet spot, right? And that's why I've shown your graph a few times. And then even then I get, well, yeah, but what else was going on? And there's probably other reasons, it's kind of like, why do we default to say this isn't really helping, when we've got people that are saying, hey, this not only helped me feel more comfortable at work to say, I don't feel right not having the grinding shield, but it also helped me at home, and I'm still working here and I haven't left because things are a little better at home.
Yeah. And look, I think we've got years of evolution ahead of us in being able to have, really strong conversations in a workplace around emotional intelligence, around psychological safety. But if I can just share, there was one person who went through the Cargotec program that really took my heart, and his name was Sean. And I talked about this in Hawaii as well, because it was very profound what his feedback was at the end of the program. So Sean was one of the late entrants to the leadership programs. We had a couple different streams. We had the workplace behavior program, and then the leadership program, which were structured a little bit differently. And the leadership program was a bit more intensive over a longer period of time. So Sean was a middle manager who came into that program on recommendation from his boss, and he showed no interest at all. He would come into the room late every single session. He didn't do the work between the sessions. He sat back and just crossed his arms and legs and just had a stone face, and just had this look of, I don't want to be here, every single time. And this was over 6 months. And I felt that from him every single time. He didn't want to be there, and he wasn't getting anything from it. So I kind of, in my mind as the facilitator, I wrote him off. I thought, well, he's just another body in the room, but I didn't give him much attention. At the end of the program, they were asked to complete a feedback form. And the response that he gave for the life-changing impact of the program is, he said, the first thing I want to say is thank you. He said, earlier this year, I was going through a lot of personal issues. So he had a marriage breakdown, a custody battle, as well as some disciplinary action for poor workplace behavior. And he said, without the emotional intelligence program, I would have made some very poor decisions and handled those things much differently. But because of what I've learned in here, I've applied it to my personal life, and I now have a better relationship with my kids, and a better relationship with my ex-partner. And I just thought, when I read that, I thought, wow, you can't write off anybody in your own mind. You just don't know you don't know what people are going through, or how what you say or do is going to impact them. And I can guarantee you that young man's life was much better coming out of this program than it was going in, because of the tools that we were able to give him. And if that says anything about the value of emotional intelligence in any workplace, manufacturing or otherwise, it's that you just don't know what's going to resonate with people and make an impact in their life. And to me, that is worth investing in.
Yeah, I saw something recently. It's a quote from Robin Williams. It's kind of going around Facebook right now. It says, "Everyone you meet's fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind always." And that's a quote attributed to Robin Williams. I don't know if that's him or not, but at the end of the day, your awareness of yourself and those around you, in whatever context, whether it's safety or just doing life, in your profession and your personal life, that's powerful, very powerful. Good stuff.
And Nikki, you got a whole story, but if there's what's the main thing on how working with Sean and on yourself, like what's the one thing, is this self-awareness, or what's the one thing that's impacted you personally the most to get you to where you are right now?
Okay, it's self-awareness, because it underpins everything. It absolutely underpins everything. I am a very big advocate for self-leadership as well. And I firmly believe that we cannot have we cannot inspire other people unless we inspire ourselves first. So everything is an internal job. It has to start from you, and then it radiates outward. And too often people miss that, because that's sometimes, looking at yourself isn't where people, it's not a comfortable place to look. But
all right. Well, we got to peel the onion on this one now. Come on. So what's the trick? What's the formula? What's the spice for addressing this self-awareness topic? Like, wherever I am today, how tomorrow can I become more self-aware? What would it be, Trevor, Nikki? I'll share with you some things that I do, but curious. I mean, I think our listeners would really benefit from this.
Well, I got two things written down, and they're a quote from Nikki, and it was two questions to ask yourself. How do I feel about this? And is that what I really want? And that was from you, Nikki. I wrote those down because it was like, okay, you know what? Those are two good things. Like, how do I feel about not grabbing that grinding shield? Is that really what I want to do? I mean, just something as simple as that. Did I put that into the right context? Did I get that right?
Love it. I love it. Yeah, very broad questions too that can be applied in so many ways. There's something I talk about having a wet bathing suit feeling. And this is actually something I'll tie into authenticity as well as self-awareness. But imagine putting on somebody else's wet bathing suit. And just that.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
No way.
Exactly. There's a discomfort there. And if you put on somebody else's wet bathing suit, you are probably going to experience some level of discomfort. Maybe privately, you may not show it and start kicking and screaming or whatnot, but you're going to feel uncomfortable. And I use that analogy as a way of kind of as a checkbox, how do I feel about something? So as you were saying, Trevor, how do I feel about this? If I have that feeling like I've just put on somebody else's wet bathing suit, then I need to examine that further, because what that tells me is that there's a part of me that isn't okay with whatever it is. So, I use it in coaching sessions where somebody will be telling me about a goal that they're pursuing, or a conversation that they need to have, or something that is uncomfortable. And I'll talk to them about that feeling, about that wet bathing suit feeling. If you feel uncomfortable, go with it. You've got to explore it further. And usually that's a very good trigger for being able to take that next step, that peel that next layer of, okay, what's really going on? What's really causing me to feel discomfort about this? But tying it into that little fun analogy is really quite beneficial.
I'm just thinking, would I rather walk across a parking lot naked or wearing Dave's wet bathing suit?
That's an easy answer for me. I'm going naked.
Yeah, it is a great analogy, because it's kind of like, would you rather see me for who I am, or would I rather be like in this wet bathing suit and be wrapped up in somebody else's junk? Like, no, I just want to be naked. And I'll use that terminology sometimes. All right, I'm getting naked here. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like, I'm just going to tell you what I'm thinking. This is just like, this is it. This is Trevor. This is who you're going to get.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So when you've got that, Nikki, when you've got that discomfort, when you have that feeling as if, you're in that wet bathing suit, what's the trick to getting out of it as soon as you can?
Yeah. You've got to pause. So, whatever the situation is, and whatever your involvement is with it at that moment, it's when you feel that feeling, that private discomfort, it's time to pause. And whether that's just a pause to, have a sip of water, to take a deep breath, to go for a walk, to park it overnight, or, sometimes we even need longer pauses where months could go by before we readdress something. But if you notice that discomfort within yourself that says, I'm not okay right now, that's an invitation for you to pause, take a step back and unpack it a bit further. Take a step back to see that broader view of what exactly is it that I'm not okay with. Is it my relationship with someone? Like maybe it's Trevor. Maybe I'm feeling really uncomfortable with him, and I need to take a step back and go, okay, what happened the last time we spoke? Was there something that was not said that should have been said? Was there something that should have been closed and wasn't closed? There's still an open loop happening. Or is it I'm worried about his response to, there's so many different things that you can discover when you pause. And it's so simple. And I think that's why it's underrated. The pause, the breathing, and then just taking a step back.
Too easy. I got to use that one. Like, if I feel that way, what was the last interaction? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And do you have the relationship with that person to be able to say that? Hey, Trevor, I'm feeling a little uncomfortable from the last time we met. Can we just talk about some of my concerns before we do X, Y, and Z? And those questions, those self-reflection questions, getting into your own awareness of how do I feel about this and why do I feel this way? What has happened that's causing me to feel this way? Those are the things that, call me a romantic, but those are the things that can save lives.
Absolutely.
Because being able to have that kind of conversation, if we have that conversation right before I go and pick up a grinder, it could change the outcome of the situation completely by how I feel about it.
Wow.
Sometimes we want more cowbell. Sometimes we want more Nikki. And I think that's where we're at, Dave. This time has just gone by too fast.
Definitely.
Nikki knows how to be a badass. And we're going to leave in the show notes there. She just published a book with some frameworks more about what she's talking about. If you're interested, I read it. I got some quotes down here. It was fantastic. She's got an amazing story, which we cannot unpack in 30 minutes. Thanks so much for coming on, Nikki.
Thank you so much for having me. Wonderful to be here. Thanks, Trevor. Thanks, Dave.
Guys. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. How you show up matters.
We'd love for you to subscribe, share with a colleague, and tell us what you think.
Your feedback's important to provide this high-quality, powerful program that makes a difference in your life and others. Take care.
See you next time.